Nellie Bly, The Cost of Representation. Although Nellie Bly was neither the first nor the youngest newspaper woman of her time, her revolutionary and groundbreaking writings led to a complete change in the treatment of the lower class she wrote about and paved a path for women in journalism.
On May 5, 1864, Nellie Bly, or Elizabeth Jane Cochran, was born in Pennsylvania. Elizabeth's family had rough beginnings. Her father, Michael Cochran, died when she was 6. Since Michael hadn't left a will, he left his family with little money. Elizabeth's mother, Mary Jane, married again, but it ended in divorce a few years later. Elizabeth, at age 15, went to attend Indiana Normal School. She ran out of money after 1 year and returned home to her mother. They moved to Pittsburgh to live with Elizabeth's 2 older brothers. She only had 1 year of formal education. Elizabeth looked for work in Pittsburgh, but it was hard to find because she was a woman. In her time, most women had their life stories written for them. During the late 1800s, women weren't accepted into the workforce like men. At 19, she read an article in the Pittsburgh Dispatch that negatively represented women. Elizabeth was upset to see the publication and wrote a rebuttal to the editor. The editor was impressed with Elizabeth's letter and hired her to work for the newspaper. This is when she made her pen name Nellie Bly, based on a popular song at the time. Nellie didn't stay in Pittsburgh for long. She moved to Mexico and reported there for 6 months in 1886. In 1887, Bly was in New York looking for a newspaper that would hire her. At the time, there were few women in the workforce. Bly wanted to make her mark, and she knew how to do it.
1887. Bly has moved to New York looking for work as a professional journalist. She went to the head of the New York World, Joseph Pulitzer, and asked for a job. The World did stories that were sensational, made to capture the audience. They also published hard-hitting investigative articles, which matched completely with Bly's style. She presented her ideas and was hired. It was the fall of 1887. Nellie was 23 years old, one of a handful of female reporters in the city, and ready to do something great. On September 22nd, she accepted an assignment that was unique and dangerous: to find out what life was like inside Blackwell Island's insane asylum. She immediately took on the challenge. Her assignment was to enter the asylum and to find out its inside workings, not to tell a story, but to tell the facts, which she strived to do in all of her stories. To enter the asylum was its own ordeal. Bly went to a boarding house, where she scared the inhabitants, putting them into a state of fright. Soon a policeman came to take her away. She went to the Essex Market Police Courtroom, where Judge Duffy decided her fate. She was going to a hospital, and then to the asylum. When Nellie reached the asylum, she removed her facade. She once again acted like a normal woman, but this did not make a difference. Despite the fact that she was a perfectly sane woman, she lived the same as the others. The nurses and doctors were not trained or experienced. Bly later said, "Here is a class of women sent to be cured. I would like the expert physicians who are condemning me for my actions, which have proven their ability, to take a perfectly sane and healthy woman, shut her up and make her sit from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. on straight back benches, do not allow her to talk or move during these hours, give her no reading, and let her know nothing of the world or its doings. Give her bad food and harsh treatment, and see how long it will take to make her insane. 2 months would make her a mental and physical wreck." Bly lived with the patients and talked with them over the coming days. Many she talked to were perfectly sane, just could not communicate because they were immigrants or were taken to the asylum under false charges. But the doctors and nurses kept it firmly in their mind that if a patient was at the insane asylum, they were, without a doubt, insane. For 10 days she lived on that island, and if she had been anyone else there would have been no chance of her escape. A reporter once said, "The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in, but once there it is impossible to get out." On Friday, October 7, 1887, Bly left the asylum. Just 2 days later, the New York World printed her 2-part illustrated story on the front page, titled "Inside the Madhouse." Her stories received immediate success. She hoped that her time in the asylum would all pay off. It did. A month after her stint, a grand jury panel went with Bly to the asylum. Although it had been rather cleaned up since her last trip, the panel still believed her story, and over $1 million was presented to give aid to the insane. In comparison, that is over $27 million in today's money. Nellie felt that her trip was a success. Around the same time, Nellie Bly also published her own book about the experience, titled 10 Days in a Madhouse, that is still read today, but Bly did more than just that. Although she wasn't the first newspaper woman in America, she was the first young woman to do a stunt like this. She was one of the first in her era to report in that style. Brooke Kroger, the first person to write an accurate and detailed biography of Nellie, made this statement: "To succeed at feigning insanity and live to write about it was an extraordinary feat," Kroger writes in her book. As the achievement of a woman journalist in this period, its brilliance was blinding. Fame is ignited and spread fast and far. After her time in the asylum, she did more stories by going undercover. She got herself arrested to see what it was like for women in prison. She went to a free clinic to see how the doctors treated their patients. In 1888, she went on a trip around the world in only 72 days. She wrote a book about it. But Bly did more than create lasting stories. She also paved a path for future writers. When she came to New York, the most that women were expected to do in a newspaper was to describe the latest in food or fashion. After Nellie Bly, that changed. Her hands-on approach to journalism developed into a practice now called investigative journalism. Her sensational stories had traveled across the country, being read by thousands. Many women followed her example and traveled on the same path. The years after Nellie Bly encouraged many female reporters to make their way into journalism. And now there are thousands of female reporters in the United States. She broke barriers, did what wasn't common, and led people to a new era that we are impacted by today.
Through the courage and perseverance that Nellie Bly had, she was able to change the outlook on women in the press industry. Not only did she represent females in the workforce, but she was also a smart and talented journalist who wrote eye-catching stories. Her pieces of writing went far in achievements. Bly's first publication of her experience in the insane asylum, 10 Days in a Madhouse, helped aid the mentally ill. Her life changed the way news is spread today. And along with her other stories, her influence changed the world forever.